All right, so the next poem I like to look at is called The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. This was written in 1919. You hear the term Second Coming, again, because we're in a Christian university. You probably think about Christ's second coming, and Yeats himself will fill this poem with lots of biblical allusions, which makes your training in the Bible come in handy if you never thought it did before. So here's the poem. Maybe you've interacted with it previous to this. Sorry, my face is going to get in the way and I'll move it around. We'll read it and then again, we'll make a couple quick comments on it. Here's the poem. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loose, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out, when a vast image out of spiritus mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Okay, we'll break this poem. There should actually be a division here, but I wanted to try to fit it all on one slide. So we'll break this poem into 3 quick parts and discuss it. I'll try to be brief, but there's a lot in this poem. This poem is one of the most important poems in the 20th century, and Yeats has managed in a very small space to encapsulate a lot of ideas and in some ways to be very prophetic about what's coming in World War II, which he would not live to see. So as we open, turning and turning in the widening gyre, right? A gyre is a spiral, so we're picturing this widening gyre, right? Which gives us the image of a tornado. And in that space, then the falcon cannot hear the falconer. So I don't know what you know about falconry. I would imagine a lot. But what falconers have to do is they have to go out into the wild and capture baby falcons when they're little and raise them in captivity. And they got like those like big things and jessops and all that stuff, right? And they send the falcon out, and then they give some kind of like whistle, and in comes the falcon landing where it is. And you've seen the falcons before with those like little hoods on and stuff. They're trained to have this very close communication with the falconer. So the image now is that the falconer standing at the center sends up the falcon in the whirlwind, and now there's disconnect. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. What is the falconer to the falcon who's up there circling around and trying to... The falconer is home, right? The falconer is the center. And if the falcon can't find the falconer, then he's lost. In this communication breakdown, 2 things that should be in close communication have been rent asunder. And in that space, it's really hard to know what's there. It's really hard to know where your home base is. And the falcon now is disconnected from what should be his home. So the next line, things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Chinua Achebe, I don't know if you guys have read this novel, but Chinua Achebe wrote a book called Things Fall Apart based in this line, the title at least borrowed from this line from Yeats. And the idea here is like, what happens when that thing that's at the center of your understanding, what's your falconer? What's the thing that kind of like gives your life that clarity and that understanding that if that were taken away, would create this kind of wobbling sense of instability. And that's what's happening here. The center can't hold, and in that kind of space, we get something that's breaking up and losing its stability. When that happens, now we have this idea of like someone with their finger in the hole of a dam, right? We can't hold it anymore, and pressure's breaking. And so what's loosed, mere anarchy, lawlessness, chaos, is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed. And everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. It's an interesting thing that Yeats picks up on pretty immediately, right? Anarchy and this sense of like things, pressure points that are now loosed. They affect the innocent. They affect people who are helpless. They affect people who have no part and no stakes in these things, right? And if war tells us anything, the cost is so much more than the warring nations face. The cost is so much more than the people who have voluntarily joined into service or the soldiers who have pledged their life to the cause. The cost is also in women and children and land. The cost is also in animals and water and air and all these other things where innocence is drowned as these things break loose. I like that he uses the word loosed. When I was a kid, I had a yellow lab who was like, I don't know, I swear he was like 120 pounds. He was massive. And I was like little in middle school. And so we go on walks with this dog, and he'd see a biker or a squirrel or whatever, and he'd be like ready to go. And for me, it was just holding him back as hard as I could. And when something is like flying, all that energy is moving towards that thing. Loosing it's nothing but passive. It's just letting go. The harder thing is straining to hold it back, right? So Yeats has this idea of like all this stuff is pressurized, ready to burst out. It's just waiting to be loosed. It's just waiting to be let go of. These next two lines, I think, are some of the most important lines to describe something Yeats wouldn't even see. He wouldn't even see World War II, but he was just like right in that space, in the spiritus mundi, the spirit of the zeitgeist. He just saw it, and he says this: the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Conviction, in our space especially, it means to be convicted of something. It means there's like a right or a cause or something true and purposeful that convicts us, that makes us believe we should act in accordance. He says the best people in this space, they don't have any convictions at all. They're super apathetic. The best people are doing absolutely nothing. And you know who are the people who got passionate intensity? The world shakers, the people who are starting movements and creating spaces where people are getting together. They're the worst people. They're in the 20th century. Who are they? Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, right? All these guys, Mao, who are able to pull together these massive groups of people to do horrible, horrible things, right? While good people stood on the sidelines and didn't know what to do. And that's what Yeats says here is this kind of thing that we've cliched, that's like all that's necessary for evil to thrive in the world is for good men to do nothing. This idea that he puts forward in more poetic language is this sense of like really good people are doing nothing. They're apathetic and they don't have any sense of their morality. All these Hamlets spinning around in the corner to be or not to be. And the people who have answered that and have started down the line, they're people who are doing some scary stuff. And so in that space, when things are dark, right? The night is darkest just before the dawn. Look to my coming at dawn on the third day. We have surely some revelation is at hand, right? Surely there's like something that's coming to save us. The second coming is at hand, which is a big part of Christian eschatology. Things are going to get really, really dark right before Jesus comes back, and things get a lot better, right? So in this darkness, surely we must be ready for some rejuvenation. Hardly are those words out, Yeats says, when a vast image out of spiritus mundi, which is the spirit of the world, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, the sign of the times, to quote my favorite artist, Harry Styles, troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, so out there in the outskirts, a shape with lion body and the head of a man. We got something here that's powerful and vicious and bestial, but also rational and intelligent, cunning. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun. Think about those hot summer days when you're like, please, sun, don't be so hot. You can't reason with the sun, right? You can't be like, sun, I'll like give you some cows, and then like maybe you can like lower your temperature a little bit and not like burn up all my crops. It doesn't work that way, right? It's blank and pitiless. It doesn't care about you. It has no ability to care about you. It's moving its slow thighs while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. This might seem like a weird image to conjure up these slow thighs. What I think of it is like it's like Godzilla, you know. And in the film, you only see this little box, and the whole box is just leg, right? And it's leg tramping through, and the camera is set back enough that you're seeing this only a leg, and birds are reeling around it, and you're like, this thing is massive. And why is it slow? Because it's huge. What's in its way? What's it got to hurry for? Why does Godzilla have to rush? He just has to slowly trample through with these massive thighs, working his way through and bringing destruction everywhere that he goes. This is not a positive image. This is not Christ triumphant, right? White horse, sword in his mouth. There's nothing here that suggests the kind of like biblical eschatology that would lead to redemption or to saving. Instead, what we have here is something that suggests more destruction. And so he says, the darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? A couple things here that make us sound like we're talking about Jesus. If you look at the timeline of history, right? He's writing this in 1919. If you have time immemorial on the other side of the X, and you have the X, which we could say was roughly 20 centuries ago, well, what happened 20 centuries ago that was so important, in fact, that we tell all of our time according to it? There was a rocking cradle that created the birth of Jesus. Well, the cradle didn't. Whatever. You get what I mean. The birth of Jesus, right? 20 centuries ago, the world was rocked out of its silence, out of its stony sleep, by a small little act, the birth of Christ. And then for 20 centuries, Christianity has more or less been the lingua franca of our understanding of the world. It's how we've created great art. It's at least what's been rejected or responded to, right? And Christianity still continues to be at the epicenter, because even reactions tend to be anti-Christian, which suggests still the importance of Christianity, that it is the thing that we are still reacting against. It is still the thing that we are discussing. But Yeats's suggestion is that post-World War I, in 1919, this is the end of Christianity as we know it. 20 centuries have been given to Christianity to have its space and to have its say. And it's gone up in the fires of World War I, and in mustard gas, and in people with their froth-corrupted lungs. And so his question at the end of this is, what's going to be the thing for the next bit from 1919 on, the next 20 centuries? What's going to be the thing that gives us our understanding of the world? That says centuries, 1919 on. And his image is a dark one. He says, who is this rough beast? Its hour come round at last, who slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. This sense of slouching gives you this like serpentine kind of move. It gives you something that's lazy. It's not this like onset. It's not like destruction, right? It's diminishment again. It's just like it slips in there with this this kind of almost it's lazy and it's slothful, and it just is kind of like into that space, right? So Yeats' vision here is a dark one, and it seems appropriate, though, given the destruction of the time. Again, these guys are suggesting business as usual cannot continue anymore. You can't tell me this stuff about God and religion when he's been silent during all of this destruction. That has to change. Our understanding of that has to shift in recognition of reality. This is the same question. This is theodicy. It's the same question we've been asking all year. Why does a good and loving God allow terrible things to happen in the world? And by the end of World War I, and certainly by the end of World War II, people are going to throw the biggest question marks over that as they possibly can. And they're going to say, I mean, any kind of like old zealotry for religion is going to have to take a back seat to these other more important and pressing realities.